grammar books will tell you how to form sentences or grammatically correct sentences. Pero minsan, hindi sapat yung nakikita natin doon sa grammar books for us to be able to have mastery in the language. No? So ano ba iba pang mga materials pwede gamitin? So we can use dictionaries as a resource, no, in language teaching and learning. No? So nakatulong the dictionaries in terms of vocabulary development. So in terms of spelling, pronunciation, word meaning, ito mga information ito, makikita natin doon sa dictionaries. And also information about grammar, no? Yung word collocations. Usually, itong word na ito, ay madalas na nakakasama. Or yung syntactic relationship. So, if you use this particular word, no, ano yung mga arguments that occur with this particular word, no? So, those information, no, pwede natin makita sa dictionaries. Anyway, it's also important, no, na makita natin dito eventually after your classes siguro, if you're still motivated to learn yung target languages ninyo, it's really important to foster yung learner economy. During that time, na after 10 months dun sa program, pagbalik dito sa Pilipinas, wala rin formal classes, and there's that need to learn the language, still learn the language, and eventually teach the language. Ikaw, no, as a teacher, kinakailangan pa rin talaga maghanap ng mga paraan kung paano matutunan yung language. So that means you're the one in charge, no, of the learning process. And then kayo din, no, kahit paano siguro sa mga language classes ninyo, nag-develop or nag-promote din yung learner economy in the sense na even after yung mga meetings nyo sa classes, may mga individual efforts pa rin kayo na ginagawa. Naghanap pa rin kayo halimbawa ng mga possible sources or materials that pwede nyo gamitin to learn the language with minimal supervision of your teacher. So, meron yung idea, no, ng learner autonomy. Okay, so para sa akin that time, no, malaking bagay yung itulong ng KBBI. Okay, that's the Kamus Besar Bahasa Indonesia, or the Great Dictionary of Indonesian. That's the literal, but basically a comprehensive dictionary of the Indonesian language, KBBI or the KBBI. So the Kamus Besar Bahasa Indonesia is the official dictionary of the Indonesian language, compiled by the Badan Pengembangan dan Pembinaan Bahasa. So basically, this is the language development agency of the Indonesian language, and it's considered the most complete and accurate Indonesian dictionary. Okay, so this is the official look of KBBI, because there are different versions or different online versions of this dictionary. Okay. Okay, so ano yung goals or objectives, no, ng KBBI? So nakakatulong siya dun sa standardization ng Bahasa Indonesia. It unifies spelling, vocabulary, and meaning. Okay, anong ibig sabihin doon? I mean, I think, ganun din, no, yung ginagawa natin when we use dictionary, or we consult the dictionary to look for the spelling, for example, of a particular word. We use the dictionary to consult or look for the correct pronunciation of a particular word. So in that sense, nasasatisfy, napupulfill ng KBBI itong goal na ito to unify spelling. For example, in this case, in non-formal or non-standard Indonesian text, you would encounter this form, resipo. No? And kung titignan mo halimbawa sa KBBI, walang lalabas na definition or senses. Okay? So, pero meron lalabas dyan na risiko. Okay? And then kung i-click mo yung risiko, yung lalabas. No? So, meron ang lalabas dyan na definitions or senses, and meron additional information na will look with the backhook is resipo. So, yung form kanina na resipo, this is the non-standard form. So, the dictionary also gives you that information. Okay? And this is the standard form or spelling of this word. No? So, sa parang ito, Sabi namin yun, nakakatulong yung dictionary doon sa standardization of the Indonesian language. Take note, siguro context ng Indonesia, no? Indonesia has more than 700 languages and dialects. No? The Philippines has like 180 plus languages and dialects. Indonesia has 700 plus. Okay, so that means no, talaga maraming variations yung Indonesian and posibleng magkaroon talaga ng mga quote-unquote non-standard forms no, or variations depending on the region. So in a way, nakakatulong na itong KBBI in terms of standardization. Next, another example, no, halimbawa ng word na merong variant form is the word activitas, no? So basically activities. Okay. So if you look for the word activitas, no, it will first you will see this in KBBI and it will lead you to activitas. No? So it will give you this definition and senses and information that activitas is the non-standard form. Okay. Nakatulong din yung KBBI in terms of the development of Bahasa Indonesia. Sinasabi ng ilan, and I think the Indonesian government or language agency takes it seriously that the Indonesian language has limited vocabulary. So meron ganung observation ng mga language learners na there are some words now na parang hindi nila ma-express o mahanapan ng equivalent in the Indonesian language. And I think before 2023, there were only 80,000 word entries in the dictionary. And nagkaroon ng Indonesian Language Summit noong 2023, nagkaroon ng goal yung Indonesian government to expand the dictionary to accommodate up to 200,000 entries. I remember October 2024 was the deadline for that. The shape take was extended hanggang naging December 2024. And I think they were able to meet the target. No? They allotted like 14 billion Indonesian rupiah for the development of their dictionary. That's equivalent to almost like 50 million pesos. No? I think that's a lot, I think. Considering siguro yung inaalat din na budget ng Philippine government, halimbawa sa development ng Filipino or ng iba pang mga wikas Pilipinas, the Indonesian government totally takes it seriously yung pag-develop ng Indonesian language because they really want to develop it into a global language. Anyway, so part ng development process na yan, yung pag-include o pagsama ng mga words from regional languages and newly coined words. For example, we have this expression, baper, which is very common among younger generation of speakers. The standard form is emotional, okay? Pero in colloquial, informal Indonesian, we have this expression, and it's an adjective. Chak is pagtsakapan, and then the meaning is tertawa, perasaan. Basically, having emotions or feelings. So jangan baper, yeah? Hanya bercanda. So don't be too emotional. It's just a joke. Something like that. So baper is very popular among younger generation of speakers at na-accommodate ito, isasama rin ito doon sa dictionary. So yung mga lexicographers ng KBBI, very active sila in looking for newly coined terms na pwede nang isama doon sa dictionary nila. And they have even like graduates, I think, in different regions in Indonesia, may mga workshops na ginagawa para ma-accommodate din yung mga iba-iba mga words from different regional languages or languages in Indonesia. I think there are within or currently there's like 1,000 words from the regional languages. And it's also a guide for education and literacy. Okay, pwede gamitin yung dictionary as a source for writing. Like in my case, in teaching, for example, let's say when translating a document, maraming bagay yung yung KBBI for that. Okay, there are sometimes kapag hindi ko alam yung correct spelling, I have pinaka-consult sa dictionary, or even yung meaning, or even yung form, especially pagdating sa dun sa verb morphology. Laking bagay din yung KBBI some easy access to vocabulary, especially in the context of distance learning during the pandemic. Instead of carrying yung hard copy ng dictionary, you can have KBBI anywhere you go. So very accessible, halimbawa, yung online version for language learners. And by the way, even Indonesian speakers, talagang they consult the Indonesian dictionary, and Indonesian is considered the second language for most. So again, yung mastery of the language is not that high. So they have to consult the dictionary from time to time. And it also empowers the language learning process, particularly halimbawa, in my case, pagtuturo and pag-aaral ng language. Now, sinasabi that Indonesian is an easy language to learn. Okay? And yeah, I mean, based on my experience, may basis naman yun, kung tutusin. Okay? Even after taking DIM 10, 11, parang minsan feeling mo confident ka na, okay, pwede na ako pumunta ng Indonesia after this. At hindi na ako bibibenta. Okay? But then, pagdating natin sa verb morphology, medyo nahihilo-hilo na tayo. So pagdating ng DIM 12, 13, DIM 100, 101, dito pumapasok yung parang challenging na part, ng Indonesian, aside from halimbawa, learning the passive forms, even the imperative forms, medyo sources, ito yung mga common sources of errors among language learners. Pero doon sa verbal morphology, particularly the use of mung, mungkan, and mungki. Because these are the major verbal affixes in Indonesian. Okay? Unlike in Philippine languages, we have focus affixes at marami ito depending on focus. So, tutusin kayo paano meron tayong choices based on those affixes. But in Indonesian, they have these three at pwede mag-overlap yung function nitong mga affixes nito. So just to give an idea, the mung affix is an active forming it's an active forming affix, and the derived verbs mean to do something associated with a base verb. To do something associated with a base verb. For example, baca, okay, is read. Baca is basically to read. Okay. What else? Daftar, for example, and I have that example later. Daftar is to register. So, for example, on daftar, to register, perform, basically, that particular word. Okay? So we have the following 5 examples here pala. So, mabansa, to read. Mambuka is to open. Chat is mga chat. Since this is a monosyllabic word, we have an epenthetic term, mga chat. To paint. Rokok is cigarette. Rokok is to smoke. Okay, cigarettes. So basically, to perform reaction associated with the base verb. Okay. Are you familiar, right? Baca, buka, okay. So buka, bukas, baca, basa. So it's very easy. So meron na tayong bawal actually. Yung knowledge natin of Tagalog, Philippine language was actually can facilitate the learning of the language. Next, we have sample sentences here, like, Dia mabasa buku itu, he or she read that book. And by the way, walang tense sa Indonesian, okay? So walang ganung concern. Another example here, Ron, marupok di luar, so Ron is smoking outside. Okay, take note, walang verb conjugations, to indicate tense in Indonesian. So you'll see that, unlike in English, we still have it is, are, or walang verb, subject, verb agreement. We have the Morgan affix to form active voice. And the derived verbs need to cause something to be. So, kung magpapaka, dito, linguistics na hierarchy to, formal tayo dun, that's the positive. No? Positive forming affix. To cause something to be, or to become what the base word means. No? Para mas malinaw, yung ibig sabihin niya. No? Let's take the word besar. Besar is big. So we use membesarkan, mengkan, or that's the affix, membesarkan, means to enlarge, okay, to make something big, mengkan. Dingin, so this is the base word, and then you apply mengkan, it becomes mendinginkan, to make something whole. Okay? Hidup is alive or life, okay? Manghihilupkan to turn on something like TV, radio, baka iba yung isipin natin. And tidur, okay, manghihilupkan to put something to sleep. Okay? So positive, mga equivalent yan sa Tagalog ay yung pa. For example, palakihin, palamigin, buhayin naman to. Patulugin. So we have these several sentences. We display kung point natin dito. So kita harus membesarkan foto ini. We have to enlarge this photo. Ayah mendinginkan air putih di gudang. So father chilled water in the fridge. Okay, so that's for mengkan. Okay. Another function of mengkan, aside from the positive meaning, is the benefactive meaning. Okay, so take note. Okay, isang affix can have like 2 or more functions. Like in Tagalog, focus system, you know, like more specific affixes for each focus. But in the case of Indonesian, yung positive and benefactive, isa yung affix na ginamit for that. No? So minsan, nagiging challenging siya actually. Okay. So magkano actually is indicated by the derived verbs is for benefit of someone else or the beneficiary of the action. In this case, for example, we have the sentence, palayan mengambil segelas air putih untuk Gerald. So since not everyone here is learning Indonesian, so tingnan natin yung bawat part dito. Palayan is the waiter. Mengambil is to get. Segelas air putih is a glass of water. Untuk Gerald, that's for Gerald. Okay, so pansinin yung pattern, no? So we have the subject, this is the verb, this is our direct object, followed by a prepositional phrase, which is the beneficiary of the action. And then we have this other form, no? In this case, kanina mengambil yung ginamit na verb. Here, mengambil kan. Okay, so we apply the mengkan affix. So the waiter mengambil kan. Okay, again, ginagamit natin yung mengkan to indicate yung beneficiary ng action, followed by Gerald. Okay, and then we have segelas air putih. So titingnan natin kanina yung pattern subject, and then the mengambil verb followed by segelas air putih, a glass of water, for Gerald. So, but here, we have 2 noun phrases following the verb. So we have mengambil kan, followed by our noun phrase 1, which is Gerald. Segelas air putih is our noun phrase 2. In Indonesian, meron tayo tinatawag na primary and secondary object in the case of benefactive verbs. No? So for benefactive verbs, the beneficiary should follow the verb. Pero papansin nyo, kanina mengambil, okay, that's the usual typical transitive, sabihin natin, or active. So, yung object natin doon is the glass of water. But since here, we use mengkan, which is a benefactive forming affix. So, the beneficiary, si Gerald, should immediately follow the verb. Something like that. Nasusunod niyo, even for Japanese language learners. Okay? Yeah. So, at mapapansin niyo, Kanina kasi we have a noun phrase and a prepositional phrase. But here we have two noun phrases. So the first noun phrase, the beneficiary, immediately follows the verb, mangka. Okay? Next, we have the mangki affix. Okay, ganun din, active voice pa rin siya. And here, the object that directly follows the verb is conceptualized as a static location. Okay, so you treat the primary object or the direct object as a static location. Okay, and it does not change location because there are cases where you have two noun phrases that follow the verb at papaisipalin unahin ko noun phrase. So here we have air, for example, is water. Mairi is water. Gula is sugar. Mungulari is to sweeten, to put sugar. Obat is medicine. Obati is to treat with medication. Tandatangan is manandatangan to sign. Signature. Tanda, mark, tangan is hand. Okay? Yes, tandatangan. And to sign or to put your signature on something is manandatangan. Sample sentences, doctor, mubati, lukanya, dengan antibiotika. The doctor treats the wound with antibiotic. Ibu saya menandatangani surat perjanjian. Surat perjanjian is the agreement letter. Okay, and this serves as again the static location. Okay, dito rin, no, yung luka is wound. So again, yung idea ng medicine or ng medication that you apply on the wound. So you treat the wound as a static location. That's why mangkan or mang-i is used in this particular context. Same here, no, yung letter, you treat it as a static location. That's why you apply your signature there. That's why you use mang-i. Okay? Kasi parang, this was quite challenging for my P1213 that time. Ang idea ng dito ng static location na to because pwede ko siyang tignan. Diba? Parang I can apply halimbawa, itong medication na ito doon sa wound and pwede ko gamitin yung mangkan for that. Or I can actually use mangkan for surat perjanjian. But you always consider that, no? Itong bagay na ito as a static location kung saan ginagawa yung action. Kasi sometimes parang inisip na halimbawa yung lupa or wound as what? Yung thief or patient that you can manipulate or something like that. So now, okay, this is sabi kong challenge on how KBBI can facilitate or help in the learning process, in the teaching process. So for example, here we have meron kong doon sa 1213, meron part doon na ibigay siya ng sentences, no? And then, okay, you put the correct form of the verb. Okay, is it mangkan, or mang-i? Okay, but we focus now here on mangkan and mang-i. So we have here the sentence, para gumadya, mandewa black, kunyangi baru. Young people idolize the singer. So is it mangkan or mang-i? No? But if you see, no, maybe mangkan, because you are turning, causing, yung kunyangi, the new singer, to be your idol. Right? Kasi yun yung function ng mangkan. Or mang-i, because sometimes, halimbawa, merong isang verb kasi based on analogy, based on my student experience, mang-i, okay, pag you put something, no? Doon sa tao, like for example, yung love or like, you consider halimbawa yung tao as location, where you put yung emotion or yung feeling na yun. That's why mang-i yung ginagamit na affix for that. So parang similar to this one, I think. Yung paghanga mo, yung pag-idolize mo doon sa tao, nilalagay mo doon sa object natin na kunyari baru. Okay? But, sige. So, if you're confused, try to consult KBBI. Okay? So, kapag hanapin mo naman sa KBBI Mondewari, okay, of course, there's no entry for that. Okay. Mandewakan, yes, there's an entry for that actually, but it means manganggap. Okay. sa bagay dewa, to consider someone like a god. Okay? So in this case, obviously, Mundiwa is not the correct answer, but Mundiwakan. Okay? Obviously, because Mundiwa is not an entry in the dictionary. About here, okay. So that's the correct answer. In this case, Patani Munanam na Adi Sawa niya. Okay? So Patani, the farmer. So Munanam from the base word Anam. Okay? Padi is yung rice, yung plant. And then sawa niya is the land. Okay? And then we have another sample sentence here. Patani, Munanam na sawa niya, the padi. Okay. So again, kapapis ka, is it Munkan or Munti? Kanina, parang sinabi natin, Munkan, sa caustic or graphics, Munti, location, okay, Munkan, it's also very factive. No? What do you think is the correct answer here? Is it kan or ti? For the first sentence, is it Patani Munanam na? Munanam kan or Munanami? Ha? Mananamkan, sabi Vivis, okay? What else? Mananamkan, dalawa yung choice natin, no? So either mananamkan or mananami, right? Mananami? So, bakit mananami? Based on the translation, okay? Yung rice, okay? Okay, place, okay. So, Patani, Mananami, Padi niya. Okay, so Padi is yung rice nuts, and Sawan nga is his farm or his land. Okay. This one, Patani, Mananam lang. Sawan nga is land, then ang Padi. So, for the first sentence, is it can or e? Can. Sabi ni, what's your name? And then, Mananam, me, for this one, wait daw muna, no? But we can, sometimes, no, as a language learner, parang confused ka, no? Alin sa dalawa kaya yung gagamitin mo for this? So, I mean, dito sabi ko even like 10 months of learning the language, eventually, I remember pandemic na noon, and I had to teach till 13, at hindi ko pa-master kung start dito ng Indonesian grammar. Okay. So we had to consult KBBI for that. No? So here, tanam is the base word for mananamkan. Mananam siswatu di lang. Okay? And then for mananami, mananam di lang. Okay? So isa sa mga makakatulong doon sa pag-gamit natin ng sentence, yung mga sample sentences. Kasi sometimes given the definition or the senses provided in the dictionary, hindi na siya ganun ka-klaro or kalinaw. So in this case, here, dia, ibig sabihin ng sign na yan, mananamkan. Dia, mananamkan, beberapa biji salak. No? So he planted some salak beans, no? In the farm behind at the back of his house. Okay, so mananam, beberapa biji, some salak seeds. And then here, mananam di, para patani, mananam mi, niya. So the farmer, or the farmers, planted their farm or land with palawija. Okay? So from here, makikita mo yung clue. Which one to use? Is it mananam tan or mananam mi? So, kung papakitan natin yung part nito, okay, patani, mananam, lang, padi, sawan lang. Is it can or e? E? Is it what? Sige, sabi niya kanina, so do you have a definite answer now? What do you think? Wait, wala, don't worry, di kayo kagaraduhan ng prof ninyo. Or give 10, 11 students. Is it can or e? I know parang hindi pa talaga kayo, no? Hindi pa ito nakarating, no? But eventually, I think. Kan? Sabi ni, what's your name again? June. Juno. Sabi ni Juno, mananam ka. For the first sentence and here, mananami. Mananami. Okay, that's correct. No? Why? Pagi. Okay, yung rice na. No? So, dito papasok yung positive kasi na meaning. No? So, yung plant mismo, itatanim mo siya doon sa sawa. Okay, doon sa farm, doon sa field. Okay? Here, mananami sawa niya. Sawa niya serves as what? Static location where you do the action. So that's why you apply mananami there. Okay. Next, we have this form for the base word pinjam. Okay, so you can use either muminjamkan or muminjamin. Okay, so I lent him a book versus he lent his bike to his younger brother. So for the first sentence, saya meminjam lang, dia buku. So, dia siya yung pinahiram. Okay? And then buku yun yung pinahiram mo doon sa kaibigan. So, second sentence naman sa pera is yung bike. Yun yung pinahiram. At yung adik na yung pinahiraman. Okay? So, of course, binigay ko na include based on sa knowledge natin ng Tagalog. Okay? So what's the correct answer here? For the first sentence, saya muminjam ka or muminjami? Take note, we have to consider the noun that immediately follows the verb. Is it can or e? Hindi pa rin sure. Okay, let's consult the dictionary for that. No? Okay, so muminjam ka. Memberikan sesuatu. To give something. Okay? Untuk dipinjam. Okay, so magbibigay ng something na pwedeng gamit. For example, dia meminjam kan sepeda motor kepada saya. So, he lent a motorbike to me. Okay, so take note, we have sepeda motor, yung bagay na pinahiram. Okay? And here, uminjami, memberi pinjam, to lend. Medyo mahirap pa rin siya. Pero sabi dito, iya, uminjami ako mesin. So, ako yung pinahiram. Okay? So, doon sa uminjami, ako, okay, yung pinahiram, immediately follows the verb. Dito naman sa muminjam kan, yung sa peda motor, the object, no, borrow, immediately follows the verb. So, pabalikan natin itong sample sentences na ito. Saya muminjam kan ng dia buku. What is your answer? Yes, Aaron? Muminjami? Do you agree? Okay. Mukhang kailangan namin i-review ulit. Just kidding. Yeah, that's right. Okay, that's right. It's muminjami dia buku. Okay? Because again, dia serves as the location. Parang siya yung tumatala, the recipient. Nung book. Okay, that's why muminjami is the correct form. And dia muminjam kan. Because this is the object na pinahiram. And that object na pinahiram, yun yung sumusunod doon sa ating main verb. That's why in Indonesian, word order is very important. Okay. Kasi ba kung sabi ko kanina, word order is very important. Diba saya muminjam ng buko, diga, pinahiram ko yung libro ng ako, something like that. Pinahiram ko yung sarili ko doon sa libro. Something like that, yung magiging sense. Kapag pinagbaliktad mo yung buko and diga dito. So, in Indonesia, the word order is very important, sabi nga. Okay? Okay, another example. Okay, lapit naman tapos. Yeah, so puri na, mandekat, saya, talisigan. Dekat is close, no, malapit. Pero kapag gagamitan natin ang verb affix na mag, mag-be, no? To be near. So, visit or to approach. Mrs. Serena approached me this afternoon. So, mendekat dan mendekati. Saya is I. Tadi siang this afternoon. Or Bu Rina mendekatkan radio itu ke meja saya. So, Mrs. Rina brought the radio closer to my table. So, for the first sentence, is it mendekati or mendekatkan? Were you able to figure out the answer now? Yeah. So, Bu Rina mendekati saya tadi siang. Okay? Bu Rina mendekatkan radio itu ke meja saya. So, yung natin sa Tagalog, no? To approach, no? So, ako yung location. Okay? So, lumapit sa akin si Mrs. Rina. Okay? Then, Bu Rina mendekatkan radio. So, the object radio, no? Yun yung nilapit kay Bu Rina. That's why we use mendekatkan here. Okay? So, you can also find the sample sentences from the dictionary or in the dictionary to guide you with your answer for that. And yeah. Yeah, so ito ilan no, sa mga information na pwede natin makita no, doon sa dictionary. No? Usually, we treat the dictionary as the source of what definition, the meaning, but you can find other information from the dictionary, even the etymology of a particular word. Oh, no? Etymology of a particular word, the pronunciation, the spelling, and yung collocations for the things sa grammar that can help you in forming grammatically correct sentences. Okay? Say outside the classroom, no, may kaya sabihin natin na master, na memorize natin yung rules, no? Pagdating sa actual usage of the language, parang darating sa'yo yung mangyayari experience na yun, parang walang po anong gagamitin kong form. Is it mag-tan, or mag-eat, or just something like that. So, yeah, this is one of the tools that can use to facilitate the language learning experience. So basically, itong ginawa, share ko sa inyo is a result of my reflections, okay, learning the language and eventually teaching the language. So marami tayong iba't-ibang pwedeng gamitin ng mga tools, okay, sa pag-aaral ng mga wika, okay, na target languages natin. And aside from the grammar books na ginagamit natin sa klase, dictionaries can also help us facilitate the language learning process. Okay? And on your own, you can do that. Sabi ko nga, you have 10 months of learning the language. Pagkuli ko ng Pilipinas that time, hindi ko kabisado pa masyado yung grammar. And during the pandemic, I had no choice but to teach grade 12, 13. Okay, so ang weird naman, itutulog ko siya, hindi ko siya bisado. No? So we have to find ways to master the language, not just based on the grammar books, but on different materials like dictionaries and even actual text, no, where these words are used. So yeah, so far that's my experience with the language. And one thing, siguro nga na aside from the dictionary, no, I mean this non-canon e-confusion, actually mentioned the result now. Us as speakers of different Philippine languages, you use your knowledge of Tagalog. You use your knowledge of Philippine languages. Siguro next na to, pwede natin tignan. Ano yung mga features ng Tagalog? Ano yung features ng Philippine languages na pwede makatulong sa atin for us to resolve yung mga issues natin pagdating sa mga canon ng P. Okay, for non-Tagalog or non-speakers of Philippine languages, wala silang pagbabasehan, but us, I think, Pero pwede maging basihan to address this particular issue very the language. Anyway, so that's all for now. So if you have questions, yeah, I'll still have 20 minutes to answer those questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, Sir Isko. So the floor is now open for your questions. We have a few minutes for your questions. Raise your hand kung meron kayong tanong. Pero sige sir, habang nag-isip po sila kung ano yung magtatanong. Nakikita natin, tabagin nyo rin sir, yung tulong ng mga wika na alam natin, lalo na kung merong similar forms doon sa mga salita. So nabagin ko po kanina yung tanam, malapit sa Tagalog na tanim. For learners of Japanese, di ba, nakikita rin naman natin yung similar forms sa English, mas madali natin maalala when we study them in Japanese kasi alam natin yung English equivalent. Pero gusto ko lang po sana itanong, paano kaya kung malayo yung form nung salita doon sa mga alam natin languages? So, ang tips po kayo ibigay para sa learners?
Yeah. Well, now I'm teaching an English speaker in Malaysia. And so long as challenge kung paano pabilisin yung acquisition or yung learning na ng vocabulary. And I can't help but compare it with my experience for teaching Indonesian to Filipino learners. Kasi nga, meron na tayo meron na tayo parang nakapondo na sa atin ng mga vocabs. So, pwede natin gamitin. Okay, tanang, tanim, basa, pupo, no, satu, dua, tiga, no, those words. So, tututusin, kinakailangan mo i-familiarize na equivalent form niya sa Indonesian. There are times na isip mo na, okay, related pala sila. Kanina, tangan is hand in Indonesian. And in Tagalog, we have the word tangan, which is, no, an action word to hold. No? So, semantically, related pa rin sila. Or alpas, for example, and in Indonesian yung lepas, okay, to be free from. Pero then, alpas is to be free from. Anyway, so, in a particular context, nakatulong talaga siya. Kaya sasabi ng lepas. Dito, in that case, nakatulong talaga yung Philippine languages na ito. But for non-speakers of Philippine languages, dito papasok yung ibang considerations in second language or even foreign language learning. Okay? There are biological factors or considerations involved. Ano ibig sabihin natin dito sa biological considerations? No? Age is a factor in language learning. For language learning or language acquisition to happen, kung sino yung maka-affect ng learner, like kasi sinasabi na, kung consider natin yung critical period hypothesis. So, parang merong critical period, sinasabi 5 years old, sinasabi yung puberty stage, beyond puberty stage, medyo mahirap na or medyo mas challenging na yung pagkatuto ng language. But personally, that's just one of the considerations. Other considerations like psychological considerations. So, dito na po pasok yung motivation. So, ano motivation mo? Meron bang intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, or integrated instrumental motivation, learning the language, no? And I think during that time, din yung maraming bagay sa akin na para kahit pa paano naging mas successful in language learning because I was already in my 30s when I went to Indonesia to formally learn the language. And of course, very challenging ngayon. No? In our block, ako yung pinakamatanda at that time. No? And titignan natin biological factor, the consideration, or beyond the ideal age so to learn a language, no? To acquire a language. In terms of personality, sinasabi kasi na yung extrinsic, extroverted the personality, and in a way, also help to learn a language. And that time, until now, hindi naman ako extroverted. Parang hindi ako masyadong interact sa tao. So, ano yung makakatulong sa akin to learn the language? And I think that's motivation. Okay, so that time, motivation at the same time, I think with pressure to learn the language, no, which I only have like 10 months, no, to learn the language, and eventually go back and teach language. So yung pressure na mataas. So I really need to motivate myself, okay, na kinakailangan matutunan itong lingwahe ito. Oh, even that time, ang feeling ko very instrumental ng motivation ko, okay? In your case, no, you have to assess, evaluate, why are you learning the language? Any motivation you, why are you learning the language? Because if you're not really that motivated, wala kayong malalim dahilan to learn the language, hindi ganun successful, di magiging gusto na. So marami ganun considerations. So I want to focus on that, yung motivation. Because in my experience in that time, I think yung talagang nag-push sa akin to focus, no, on the learning process. And yeah, I think it was pretty successful.
Thank you, sir. So any more questions from the audience?
See,
Era.
hi.
Sure.
Okay, so yung mga fellow ano din natin.
Okay, serious po. May question lang ako kasi in my experience in teaching English, Spanish, and French, yung mga learners, kasi lahat tayo dito linguists or budding linguists, lahat tayo may interest when it comes to linguistics, basically grammar, for example. But then, yung ibang learners, hindi sila necessarily aware with the linguistics or wala silang mental linguistic awareness. Yes. So, I wanted to know, anong possible way to be able to boost the mental linguistic awareness of a learner? Is it possible to use these tools or is it possible to artificially boost awareness?
You know what, in one of my conversations with Kat, no, si Kat yung sinaming teenage is also taking Indonesian, pero nagturo siya na, like, parang ng Germans, and nagturo siya ng English, no, abroad. And that's one thing I realized na my exposure, okay, to the language, even to the teaching of the language is very linguistic, very, very formal yung approach. And that's one thing I realized na, if given the chance to teach Indonesian to non-linguists or to, let's say, students who are not familiar with the linguistic terms. Okay? So how do I do that? To be honest, hindi ko kasi naisip. And in my experience, because I've been, teaching the language lang 6 years, that's exposure ko with university students who I assume, have this linguistic knowledge. And yun yung pinagagalingan natin na we can use yung knowledge natin of our first language or our second languages to facilitate the learning of the target language. So, pwede siya talaga. Yun, doon sa conversation, naisip ko na, what if tuturo ako tapos hindi alam itong nouns, pronouns, even direct verb, indirect verb, object, hindi ko pa siya yung realization ko, that was like 2 weeks ago, na I think hindi ko pa kayang magturo sa mga students na walang masyadong linguistic contact. But siguro to answer that question, you have to give them others. Okay? Others, for example, how to form, sentences. You don't say subject and predicate. Because those are technical terms, Pero pwede nga, in Indonesian kasi, basically to form sentences, you have a subject and predicates. Or siguro sa iba, subject, verb, object, So siguro para mas maging malinaw, mas madaling i-digest, for non-linguist, meron sa subject. So your subject can be, oh my God, a noun, Pero it's still very technical, okay? Pwede sabihin, it's a name of a person, it's a name of, an object, followed by, let's say, an action verb, okay? A word that indicates an action, or assuming sabihin natin, meron ng basic, no, part of speech, no, based on their experience, noun, followed by a verb, a noun followed by an adjective, a noun followed by a prepositional phrase, something like that, no? So you have to give them anchors, no, that's easier to digest, no, for language for non-natives, no? Well, I'm assuming nakakapano siguro, yung mga terminologies like nouns and verbs, mas madali na sa inyo digest for them, no? I remember in one of my lessons, no? Basic sentence construction in Indonesian, subject predicate, basically. So, NPVP, you know, from the linguistics. But ano yung noun phrase na yan, ba? It's basically a noun, a pronoun, a noun phrase. Ano yung predicate natin? It can be a verb, it can be an adjective, it can be a prepositional phrase, or another noun. Something like that. So, basically siya. Ngayon, yung predicate mo, ano yung verb phrase? It can be a combination of verb followed by a noun phrase, something like that. So, paano less technical yung term na ginagamit, you know? So yeah, yun, I don't know, parang ginagawa ko na siya kahit paano pala, siguro hindi lang ako ganun ka-aware na na-apply ko na rin siya. But yeah, that's one of the realizations I had 2 weeks ago.
Thanks, sir, and thank you for your question. So we have time for 2 quick questions. Anyone in the audience? Wala na, sir. So, magtatanong po muna ako, speaking of patterns, doon sa structure of the affixes. So, yung tatlo po nabigay na yung man, man, kan. Nabanggit na po kanina, pero gusto ko lang po sanang balikan for everybody's reference kung bakit capital N yung nilagay na symbol doon, ano yung mga, paano siya nagpabago at ano yung mga tulog. Kasi pili ko po ay yung sound change na yun ay relevant for people learning English, Tagalog, Bahasa, and Japanese.
Right? It doesn't actually have something to do with yung capital letter M. Maganda kasi siya. Diba? Yung capital letter M. Before this pala ito. Anyway, no, the capital letter N, no, it's a cover term that we use, no, for the nasals. Okay? So in linguistics, so we have different nasal sounds. Okay? So yung nasal sound yan, pwede maging M. Okay? The writing of nasal. Or pwede maging, wala tayo maging technical masyado. We have the N sound. We have the N sound. Okay, we have the N sound in Indonesian. Kompleto yun, no? Sa Indonesian, yung 4 na nasals. No? And yung capital letter N na yan, the nasal sound, okay, pwede magbago yung form niya. Pwede siya maging M, pwede siya maging N, pwede siya maging N, pwede siya maging N, depending on the sound, the initial sound of the base word. For example, besar is the base word. Besar, okay? And then, no, it's okay. Yung marker para may sulat, no? And then, yung capital letter N na nasal, no, followed by B. Okay? So you have 4 possible nasals na pwede gamitin. M, N, N, or N. So, ano yung gagawin natin? It's because the bilabial nasal sound is closer to the bilabial sound ng besar. So again, yung tinatawag natin sa phonology na sa morphologic process na assimilation. So, nagagaya ng isang tunog yung features ng katabi ko. Okay? Kasi nga, instead of sabihin, besar, it's, you know, easier to say besar, right? You don't say besar because it's, you know, easier to say besar. Again, for ease articulation, nangyayari itong mga processes.
Thank you, sir. So one last question from the audience. Yes, please quickly introduce yourself.
So after ng talk nito, next SEM, we have like 25 students who did this.
Ay, salamat siya.
Tapos yan,
Nama saya Dre,
hello, Jay.
dari CSSP. jurusan saya ilmu politik.
Okay.
Ang question ko lang naman po is how beginner friendly yung KBBI online.
Oh, yeah.
Kasi pasensya na hindi ko po kita dito masyado sa likod. Na kapag nag-search ka ba, may English na o may double effort pa na i-search kasi parang ang nakikita ko lang na lumalabas ay bahasa at doon mo siya.
Good
So
question.
may double effort pa na kailangan mag-search pa ka ng another dictionary that would translate the rest of the bahasa Indonesia na kapag sinerch ko sa KBBI on.
Terima kasih banyak atas pertanyaannya. Untuk KBBI ya, itu dalam bahasa Indonesia. Everything is in Indonesian. So is it user friendly for beginners? No. Okay, you have to be at least in the intermediate level. Kaya even sa 10-11 hindi ko siya ginagamit. Pero latter half ng game 12-13, medyo i-introduce ko siya. Kasi kaya paano meron na silang people na vocab na pwede makatulong for them to learn the language. And KBBI is a learner's dictionary. I remember in one of my interactions with the lexicographer of KBBI last year, he would ask me, is it time for a KBBI learner's dictionary? Yeah, why not? Okay? Kasi nga, itong form ito ng KBBI, talagang it's bridge, and monolingual siya. So, hindi siya useful for beginners, but at least dapat nasa intermediate level ka for you to be able to understand. Halimbawa, yung nakalagay doon ng mga details. Before, based on my experience, what I do is, gumawa ako ng copy-paste and then I Google Translate. I mean, just to see, kung hindi ko maintindihan, yung mga entries doon yung mga entries doon sa dictionary. So yes, ito yung next project na I think ng Indonesian Language Agency, and that is develop a learner's dictionary, which can be more useful for language learners. And yeah, parang there's the political will actually to develop it unlike us. Anyway.
Okay, so once again, many thanks to Sir Isko for engaging us in sharing our knowledge on teaching and learning Bahasa Indonesia. On behalf of the Department of Linguistics, we present the certificate of appreciation at NBE Content.
Kinuhan ko rin ba eh?
Ano po? Iba ba yung puti? The certificate of appreciation is presented to Francisco C. Rosario Jr. for delivering the lecture Beyond Definitions using KBBI online as a tool for teaching and learning Bahasa Indonesia, held on 27 August 2025 as part of the Talks on Asian Languages lecture series of the University of the Philippines Diliman Department of Linguistics. Signed, J.R. Igno, Coordinator Talks on Asian Languages. So we also request the presence of Sir J to give the certificate to our chairperson. Okay, so once again, many thanks, Sir Isko, and we also thank the audience for their participation and questions, including those watching our live stream on YouTube. For the members of the audience, if you want a certificate of attendance, please scan the QR code posted around the room or at the Bonser registration table. Regularly check our website and social media pages for announcements on future events and activities. On 28 August, tomorrow, we have back-to-back installments of the Philippine Indigenous Languages Lecture Series at the Pilar Herrera Hall. Assistant Professor J.R. Igno will first talk about From Sambal Kaitan to Tagalog Quezon, folk-tailing traditions. After that, Assistant Professor Elsie Marie Orr will talk about the Tagalog and other Philippine languages as heritage languages in the Filipino diaspora, the case of Filipinos in Campania, Italy. Finally, on 29 August, we will have our Career Fest and Asian Language Days. More announcements will be posted soon. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Terima kasih banyak. Sampai jumpa.